Hello, fellow witches and wizards. My name is PhoenixGinny, and welcome to the stream. Welcome to Storytime Saturday 23. Am I right about that? I am right about that. Cool. Okay, yes. Storytime Saturday number 23. We've done 23 of these. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to be reading chapters 9 and 10 of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Before I start reading, all the usual things. If you're new, so glad you're here. I just got new subscribers last night alone, and I am so excited. So glad that you're here. I really want to get up to 50 subscribers. I'm going to do something special. I'm not sure what I want to do. Maybe a cooking stream or something. I don't know. But I really want to get up to 50 subscribers. So if you're not subscribed and you're watching this, please click subscribe. And become a subscriber today. Also, feel free to talk in the chat with me. I will be reading this out loud, and I'm going to be, if you're new here, I'll explain what I do here. I don't just read, I give commentary, and I explain what's going on, and my thoughts and feelings, and honestly, it's impossible for me to do that since I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, so I have, it's a visceral reaction from me when I'm reading this, so I couldn't read this silently if I wanted to. So there's a lot of commentary that I do, a lot of spoilers too, so if you're unfamiliar with the story and you don't want it spoiled for you, it will get spoiled for you. No way to avoid that. But feel free to join the conversation. This is not just a read-along. I'm not just reading at you. We're reading this together. Hey, I just thought of this. If you have the book and you want to read along, feel free. That would be amazing. I didn't even think of that. But feel free to join the discussion in the chat or in the comment section if you're watching this and it's no longer live. I still read those. And please leave a like on the stream or the video whenever you're watching this. It really helps me to get more viewers because we want more people to join in the conversation. And if you do click subscribe, click the bell icon as well so you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. So I start my new job next week, so I have no idea what my schedule is. But I realized next weekend is Easter, so I'm probably not going to stream anyway. I'm a Christian. That's something you'll learn too. So Easter's kind of a big deal. And so I probably would just take that weekend off anyway. So no streaming next week. But the week after, I'll have to figure out when I'm going to stream because I start my new job and I have no idea what my schedule is going to be like. So I'll figure it out. But if you want to know what my streaming schedule is, because it does change every week, follow me on Twitter, link in the description. I leave my stream schedule every week there. Also, I was watching YouTube just a moment ago. I was having my supper. It was my lunch, and it was a little late, but I woke up a little late. And I saw something on YouTube, like it came up as an ad for the Secrets of Albus Dumbledore. I like to call it the audacity of Albus Dumbledore instead of the secrets of Albus Dumbledore. It's a little joke of mine. For those of you who don't know, I'm not against Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I'm just not a huge fan of it. I watched the first one, and I didn't really like it. I couldn't really get into it very much. I felt it was too non-canon, uncanon, whatever the English term would be. I'm not sure. It didn't feel quite right. I've read Fantastic Beasts, the textbook, and I feel like some of the beasts aren't portrayed the way they're portrayed in the book, and they added some new stuff that doesn't make any sense, and so I just didn't know. Anyway, I didn't enjoy it very much. But oh, you didn't? Oh, hello, Julia. Welcome to the stream. And you didn't like Fantastic Beasts either. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I think for me, it's just the world of Harry Potter isn't about the magic or the world. it's not about any of that. It's always been about Harry for me. To this day, I read this because he's in it. You know, it's all about him. And if he was just a muggle boy going to an ordinary school, I'd still read it because it's about him to me. And he's not in it, so I'm just not really that interested. I did give it an honest try. And I'm kind of against, I don't want to say I'm against Fantastic Beasts because I respect people who do like it because it's made by the same director and producers as the last 3 Harry Potter. Well, David Heyman is the producer, and he's been the producer for the whole thing, for every single Harry Potter movie. And then David Yates is the director, and he's been the director since Order of the Phoenix, and he does a phenomenal job. And the actual cinematography of it is really good. It's still a good film. And if it causes younger generation, because, I mean, like my generation, we grew up with Harry Potter, but Harry Potter is essentially over, so what about the next generation? Well, this is what the next generation is getting into, and that's really cool. If it gets them into Harry Potter, I'm all for it. Like, it gets them to want to explore the original source material and to watch the Harry Potter films and to get into it. I'm all for it. That's great. I want them to do that. It's just for me personally, I didn't enjoy the first one, and I haven't seen any of the others. Maybe I should give them a shot. The thing that bothers me, though, about The Secrets of Albus Dumbledore, from what I've seen from the trailers, is I dislike how involved the Muggle character is. Not that I'm against Muggles. I am not. I repeat, I am not against Muggles. But they give him a wand, and the wand works, which is highly worrying because that suggests that anybody can be magical. Anybody can just take a wand and do whatever. It doesn't matter if you have magical blood or not. And that is really, really false. Or at least I hope it's false for the Wizarding world, because then what the heck are we doing? Why don't we just give Muggles wands? There's nothing special about magic if anybody can use a wand, you know what I mean? And that's not even the worst part for me. The worst part is he goes to Hogwarts and he can see Hogwarts. That's not canon. Muggles can't see Hogwarts. That's a very important detail. What did they do to make it possible for him to see Hogwarts, I wonder? I don't know. It's just, like, I know that the books and the movies aren't going to be exact, but that's important. Those details are kind of important. And so I'm just like, I just don't want anything to do with that. But the whole point of me talking about this is I just got done watching something special that they did. It was an ad for the Secrets of Albus Dumbledore, or Secrets of Dumbledore, or whatever it's called. And I was actually really impressed with what they showed me. They showed me that the movie was about Dumbledore, obviously, and it's about his past. And I knew it was going to be about him and Grindelwald, but I didn't realize it was going to be really about his past. Like, Aberforth is in it, and they're going to talk about Ariana, and I kind of want to see that, if I'm honest. They showed some clips from from the other Harry Potter movies that kind of lean into what the story's going to be about, and I was really upset that they didn't go into what happened to Ariana in Deathly Hallows Part 2. I understand it kind of interrupts the pacing of it all, but they really just kind of skipped over it. Like, literally just jumping from one thing to the next, and they really just skipped over it. I was like, really? You're not going to talk about Ariana at all? You're not going to talk about it at all? I mean, like, it bothered me, but they might make up for it in this film and go into it, and I'm okay with that. So, I don't know. That might be interesting for me. I don't know. Maybe I'll give them a try again. I don't know. But I just saw that, and I just had to talk about that. I also want to talk about what is going to be coming up for me. First of all, May 2nd is fast approaching. I'm so excited, because May 2nd is Battle of Hogwarts Day. And that is the day that I have my annual Harry Potter marathon. Now, naturally, I can't live stream watching Harry Potter. I wish I could. Ooh, I wish I could. That would be amazing. But I thought instead, because I see videos everywhere on YouTube of people watching stuff and reacting to them. And YouTube seems to be okay with them. So I was like, what if I recorded myself watching the Harry Potter movies? And I'll cut them down. They don't want you to post the whole movie on there because that's a clear copyright infringement. But you can record yourself reacting to it with it on the screen. And if you cut it down and not show the whole movie, it's fine. And so I thought, what if I do that? That'd be really, really cool. I might try to do that this year. While I'm watching, while I'm having my Harry Potter marathon, I'll record myself and I will talk about what I'm watching, and I will edit it and cut it down and post it. And I think that would be really interesting for you guys. If not for you, for me, I would be really interested in it. It would be so, so fun. The thing is, I don't know if I want to release it as a whole thing or if I want to do it movie for movie. I don't know. But that's my problem. That's not your problem. You don't care. So that's coming up. Also, I am going to be relaunching my Patreon. I started a Patreon. I still have it. It's still up there if you want to go look at it. I mean, there's nothing on it, really. But I originally started my Patreon when I first started my channel because I was unemployed and I wanted some help while I created my YouTube content. I'm employed now, so it's not that much of a big deal, but I don't really post anything on it. The whole point of the Patreon is I wanted to post writing content on there because that's primarily what I want to be, is a writer. But I couldn't get around to do it. I was in a different place back then. It just didn't work out. So I stopped advertising my Patreon. I stopped leaving a link for it on my videos and stuff. And I still won't do that till I have something up, but I am working on stuff. I am. I'm planning on posting something May 1st, I believe. May 1st, May 2nd, the beginning of May at some point. I'm planning on posting a story. I want to post something for whatever that holiday is. In America, we have, I don't know, is it Memorial Day in May? Or Veterans Day? Is Veterans Day in, like, September? I forget. We have, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 different holidays celebrating our army. I don't know why. Our armed forces. I don't know. The point is, I grew up in the military. I'm a military child. My father was in the army for my entire childhood. Almost my entire childhood. There's a tiny, tiny bit where he wasn't in it, but anyway, for all, as much as I can remember, he has been in the military. And so I honor our armed forces, especially. And for that, I actually have a story that I wrote a couple months ago, a personal narrative, if you will, about an incident that I had as a kid, and I want to post it on Patreon. Memorial Day's in May. That is one for the fallen. Okay, good. Thank you. There's the fallen, and there's one for veterans. I don't know. I feel like we just celebrate all of armed forces on all of them. I don't know. But anyway, for Memorial Day, I mean, I still think it works. But I have a story that I wrote, a personal narrative, that I want to post on my Patreon, and it's going to be absolutely free. The story is going to be absolutely free, so please go, and if you're interested in reading, not yet, it's not posted yet, I will post it at the beginning of next month, and you can go and read that. But I'm also going to be posting something else on there, something that I found that I still have that I really want to touch up and post. When I was in college, I took a special topics Harry Potter class. That's where I get a lot of the knowledge that I share with you here, is stuff I learned from that class. And I wrote a paper for it. I wrote how the movies portray the books really well. I essentially did film analysis on all the movies and compared them to the books, and I wrote a whole paper on it. I'm going to touch it up and I'm going to post it on my Patreon. And in order to read that, you can become a Patreon subscriber, which is $5 a month. Again, it's not on there yet, so don't bother giving me any money right now. There's nothing on there. Unless you want to support my channel, which you can do that too if you want to, but I'm not pushing for that. But I will be posting my essay for that. But for my special viewers who view the live streams, I will be sharing the first part of it right here on a live stream next month. I will read the intro and the analysis for Sorcerer's Stone to kind of give you a taste of what it's like. And if you want more, you'll become a Patreon subscriber and you can read the rest of it. And I will be posting new content every single month, whether it be an essay, a personal narrative, or a poem, or a short story. I will post something every month so that you have a reason to pay me $5 a month. But that's the plan. That is the plan, and I'm really, really excited, and that's what I've been working on. So stay tuned for that. Okay, cool. Can we read now? I think that's what we're doing now. I feel like, is there something else I should talk about? I will be having a charity live stream at the end of the month, but I feel like that's not news because I have a charity live stream at the end of every month. If you're new, surprise, surprise, I do a charity live stream at the end of every month, on the last Saturday of every month. This Saturday, I don't know what charity it's going to be. Something to do with Earth Day, something environmental. And I might be doing something special for that particular live stream. So I hope to see you there. More details to come. Okay. I'll do a recap of the last two chapters. I thought of that last time. I was like, maybe I should be doing recaps. Okay, so the last time we read The Boggart in the Wardrobe. So we had our first Defense Against the Dark Arts class, and Lupin did amazing. Did a really good job lifting up Neville, who's been bullied by Snape for the beginning of the chapter, was it? Yeah. So Neville got really encouraged by Lupin. Lupin proved to be as awesome as he's always been, and then we read Chapter 8, Flight of the Fat Lady. Scabbers got attacked by Crookshanks. What else happened in this chapter? Everybody got to go to Hogsmeade except Harry. He hung out with Lupin for a little while. And Lupin explained why he didn't let Harry defeat the Boggart. If you missed last stream, I recommend you check it out because I had a great time. I was especially entertaining and energetic in the last one. And these were really good chapters, so I had a lot of cool things to say, I think. So, check that out. Okay, but the most important thing that happened was Sirius Black has entered the castle and tried to get into the Gryffindor common room. So, that is where we have left off. Where everybody's in the corridor, on the staircase, in a panic, because the fat lady just ran away from her portrait, and Peeves just told us it's because Sirius Black attacked her. So, that is where we are. Chapter 9, Grim Defeat. Professor Dumbledore sent all the Gryffindors back to the Great Hall, where they were joined 10 minutes later by the students from Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, who all looked extremely confused. The teachers and I need to conduct a thorough search of the castle, Professor Dumbledore told them, as Professors McGonagall and Flitwick closed all doors into the hall. I'm afraid that, for your own safety, you'll have to spend the night here. I want the prefects to stand guard over the entrances to the hall, and I am leaving the head boy and girl in charge. Any disturbance should be reported to me immediately, he added to Percy, who was looking immensely proud and important. I would be. Send word with one of the ghosts. So everybody's going to be spending the night in the Great Hall. Slumber party! I think that sounds really cool. I think it'd be really cool to spend the night in the Great Hall in sleeping bags. Professor Dumbledore paused, about to leave the hall, and said, "Oh yes, you'll be needing." One casual wave of his wand and the long tables flew to the edges of the hall and stood aside against the walls. Another wave and the floor was covered with hundreds of squashy, purple sleeping bags. Such a weird word, squashy. I'm not a huge fan of it. Couldn't you say comfy? Like, that's the connotation J.K. Rowling is going for. They're comfy sleeping bags. I think that would have been a better word, personally. Sleep well, said Professor Dumbledore, closing the door behind him. Oh, yeah. Purple sleeping bags. That's a trivia question, what color they are. The hall immediately began to buzz excitedly. The Gryffindors were telling the rest of the school what had just happened. "Everyone into their sleeping bags," shouted Percy. "Come on now, no more talking. Lights out in 10 minutes. You're not going to tell us that you're head boy one more time? I feel like he says it like every sentence. "Come on," Ron said to Harry and Hermione. They seized 3 sleeping bags and dragged them into a corner. "Do you think Black's still in the castle?" Hermione whispered anxiously. "Dumbledore obviously thinks he might be," said Ron. "It is very lucky he picked tonight, you know," said Hermione as they climbed fully dressed into their sleeping bags and propped themselves on their elbows to talk. "The one night we weren't in the tower. I think that was the idea. I think Sirius knew that you wouldn't be there. He's trying to, well, we all know, he's trying to get at Peter Pettigrew, which is Ron's rat. I reckon he's lost track of time, being on the run," said Ron. "Didn't realize it was Halloween. Otherwise he'd have come bursting in here." Hermione shuddered. All around them, people were asking one another the same questions. How did he get in? "Maybe he knows how to apparate." "All adults know how to apparate, Ravenclaw," said a Ravenclaw a few feet away. "Just appear out of thin air, you know." "Disguised himself, probably," said a Hufflepuff 5th year. Is Hermione going to say it? Please say it. Please say it. Yes! Yes! Sorry. "He could have flown in," suggested Dean Thomas. "Honestly, am I the only person who's ever bothered to read Hogwarts history?" said Hermione crossly to Harry and Ron. "Probably," said Ron. "Why?" They should publish that book. I want to read Hogwarts history. "Because the castle's protected by more than walls, you know," said Hermione. "There are all sorts of enchantments on it to stop people entering by stealth. You can't just operate in here. And I'd like to see the disguise that could fool those Dementors. They're guarding every single entrance to the grounds. They'd have seen him fly in too. And Filch knows all the secret passages. They'll have them covered." She's going to say that like once every book after this, I swear. How you can't just apparate in Hogwarts. I think they make a joke about that in a Harry Potter sequel on YouTube. I think Umbridge says it. He's like, she's like, "And you can't apparate in Hogwarts, right?" And then like someone off in the audience says, "Right." It's great. If you haven't seen the Harry Potter musicals by Star Kid on YouTube, I highly recommend seeing it hundreds of times. I know them like by heart. "The lights are going out now," Percy shouted. "I want everyone in their sleeping bags and no more talking." The candles all went out at once. The only light now came from the silvery ghosts, who were drifting about, talking seriously to the prefects in the enchanted ceiling. Huh? Like the sky outside... Okay, I read that. This compound sentence is a little too compound. The only light now came from the silvery ghosts, who were drifting about, talking seriously to the prefects, in the enchanted ceiling, which, like the sky outside, was scattered with stars. What with that, and the whispering that still filled the hall, Harry felt as though he were sleeping outdoors in a light wind. Once every hour, a teacher would reappear in the hall to check that everything was quiet. Around 3 a.m, when many students had finally fallen asleep, Professor Dumbledore came in. Harry watched him look around for Percy, who had been prowling between the sleeping bags, telling people off for talking. Percy was only a short way away from Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who quickly pretended to be asleep as Dumbledore's footsteps drew nearer. "Any sign of him, Professor?" asked Percy in a whisper. "No. All well here? Everything under control, sir." "Good. There's no point moving them all now. I found a temporary guardian for the Gryffindor portrait hole. You'll be able to move them back in tomorrow. And the fat lady, sir, hiding in a map of Argyllshire on the 2nd floor. Interesting. Apparently she refused to let Black in without the password, so he attacked. She's still very distressed, but once she's calmed down, I'll have Mr. Filch restore her." Harry heard the door of the hall creak open again, and more footsteps. Headmaster, it was Snape. Harry kept quite still, listening hard. The whole of the third floor has been searched. He's not there. And Filch has done the dungeons. Nothing there either. What about the astronomy tower? Professor Trelawney's room? The gallery? All searched. Very well, Severus. I didn't really expect Black to linger. Have you any theory as to how he got in, Professor? Asked Snape. All right. Snape has a theory. Harry raised his head very slightly off his arms to free his other ear. Many, Severus. Each of them as unlikely as the next. Harry opened his eyes a fraction and squinted up to where they stood. Dumbledore's back was to him, but he could see Percy's face rapt with attention, and Snape's profile, which looked angry. We forget that Percy was there. You remember the conversation we had, Headmaster, just before, the start of term? Said Snape, who was barely opening his lips, as though trying to block Percy out of the conversation. I remember reading that part during my 13th birthday party. Oh, cool. That's nice, Julia. Did I read this when I was 13? Where was I when I was 13? I was always a year younger than Harry, except for the later films. I was always 2 years younger than Harry because it took longer to make the films. So I was 12 when the third film came out. But the book came out long before the movie did. They didn't make the first film until they made the first book. So I read it much later than you did. I didn't read the first Harry Potter book until the first movie came out on DVD and VHS. It also came out in VHS at the time. I remember where I was. I don't remember exactly how old I was, though. Probably about, I don't know, 10, 11, 12. I don't know. I don't remember. I think that this was the first one I got in hardcover because it hadn't been released in paperback yet. I had all of them in paperback and hard copy because I wanted a book. I wanted the books to be able to read and take anywhere and kind of write in and scribble all over, but I also wanted nice, sleek hard copies on display in my bedroom. I don't have the hard copies anymore. I gave them to charity, but I do still have the paperback. I do, Severus, said Dumbledore, and there was something like warning in his voice. It seems almost impossible that Black could have entered the school without inside help. I did express my concerns when you appointed. I do not believe a single person inside this castle would have helped Black enter it, said Dumbledore, and in his tone made it so clear that the subject was closed that Snape didn't reply. I must go down to the Dementors, said Dumbledore. I said I would inform them when our search was complete. Didn't they want to help, sir? Said Percy. Oh, yes, said Dumbledore coldly, but I'm afraid no Dementor will cross the threshold of this castle while I am headmaster. Yes, Dumbledore is amazing. I love that. I also like how, well, let me finish reading this section. Percy looked significantly abashed. Dumbledore left the hall. Oh, that's fun. Markiplier is live. Dumbledore left the hall walking quickly and quietly. Snape stood for a moment, watching the headmaster with an expression of deep resentment on his face. Then he, too, left. Harry glanced sideways at Ron and Hermione. Both of them had their eyes open, too, reflecting the starry ceiling. What was all that about? Ron mouthed. So, Snape is talking about Lupin. He's talking about how he doesn't like that Dumbledore hired Lupin because Lupin is friends with Sirius Black, and he's afraid that Lupin helped Sirius Black enter the castle. I like how Dumbledore doesn't really take his thought seriously. Not because Snape shouldn't be taken seriously, but because Harry believes that Dumbledore takes Snape too seriously sometimes. Dumbledore gives Snape the benefit of the doubt too much, especially in later books, especially in Half-Blood Prince, when Harry tells Dumbledore, like, I think Snape shouldn't be trusted. And he tells him several times, and Dumbledore's like, I trust him, and that's it, and that's all I'm going to say on the matter. And it's kind of frustrating for Harry, because it's like, Dumbledore doesn't know what I know, you know. But he does. The thing is, he does. But this shows that it's not that Dumbledore's partial to Snape at all. In fact, I think Dumbledore still has, I don't want to say a loathing. I think Dumbledore still recognizes the dark side of Snape. And so also keeps Snape in his place as well when Snape accuses people that Dumbledore trusts. Just as Dumbledore accuses Harry, or not accuses, just as Dumbledore kind of puts Harry in his place when he distrusts people that Dumbledore trusts, he does the same thing to Snape. Like, hey, I trust Lupin. You're not going to talk about Lupin like that, sort of thing. It's good. It's good. The school talked of nothing but Sirius Black for the next few days. The theories about how he had entered the castle became wilder and wilder. I just thought of something. What made them think that the Dementors guarding the castle was going to stop Sirius Black? He escaped them the first time, remember? He escaped them from Azkaban already. Of course he got past the Dementors. Like, he did it already once before. It just occurred to me how silly it is that they're all surprised that he got in. Hannah Abbott from Hufflepuff spent much of their next herbology class telling anyone who'd listen that Black could turn into a flowering shrub. Well, close, I guess, if you think about it. The fat lady's ripped canvas had been taken off the wall and replaced with a portrait of Sir Cadogan and his fat gray pony. Nobody was very happy about this. Sir Cadogan spent half his time challenging people to duels, and the rest thinking up ridiculous, complicated passwords, which he changed at least twice a day. "He's a complete lunatic," said Seamus Finnegan angrily to Percy. "Can't we get anyone else?" "None of the other pictures wanted the job," said Percy, frightened of what happened to the fat lady. Sir Cadogan was the only one brave enough to volunteer. Sir Cadogan, however, was the least of Harry's worries. He was now being closely watched. Teachers found excuses to walk along corridors with him, and Percy Weasley, acting, Harry suspected, on his mother's orders, was tailing him everywhere like an extremely pompous guard dog. To cap it all, Professor McGonagall summoned Harry into her office with such a somber expression on her face that Harry thought someone must have died. "There's no point hiding it from you any longer, Potter," she said, in a very serious voice. "I know this will come as a shock to you, but Sirius Black—" "I know, he's after me," said Harry wearily. I heard Ron's dad telling his mum. Mr. Weasley works for the Ministry of Magic." Professor McGonagall seemed very taken aback. She stared at Harry for a moment or two, then said, "I see. Well, in that case, Potter, you'll understand why I don't think it's a good idea for you to be practicing Quidditch in the evenings." "Are you kidding me? Just take everything from this kid. What? You can't do this." "Out on the field with only your team members is very exposed, Potter." "We've got our first match on Saturday," said Harry, outraged. "I've got to train, Professor." Professor McGonagall considered him intently. Harry knew she was deeply interested in the Gryffindor team's prospects. It had been she, after all, who'd suggested him as Seeker in the first place. He waited, holding his breath. Professor McGonagall stood up and stared out of the window at the Quidditch pitch, just visible through the rain. "Well, goodness knows I'd like to see us win the cup at last. But all the same, Potter, I'd be happier if a teacher were present. I'll ask Madam Hooch to oversee your training sessions." The weather worsened steadily as the first Quidditch match drew nearer. Undaunted, the Gryffindor team was training harder than ever under the eye of Madam Hooch. Then, at their final training session before Saturday's match, Oliver Wood gave his team some unwelcome news. "Oh, come on! It's for the best. It's for the best. It's for the best. Everybody calm down." "We're not playing Slytherin," he told them, looking very angry. "Flint's just been to see me. We're playing Hufflepuff instead." Why? Chorused the rest of the team. Flint's excuse is that the Seeker's arm's still injured, said Wood, grinding his teeth fiercely. But it's obvious why they're doing it. Don't want to play in this weather. They think it'll damage their chances. It's for the best. Because Harry loses this one. Don't tell anybody. And we don't want to lose to Icky Slytherin. There had been strong winds and heavy rain all day, and as Wood spoke, they heard a distant rumble of thunder. There's nothing wrong with Malfoy's arm, said Harry fiercely. He's faking it. I know that. We can't prove it, said Wood bitterly. And we've been practicing all those moves assuming we're playing Slytherin, and instead it's Hufflepuff, and their style is quite different. They've got a new captain and seeker, Cedric Diggory. Angelina, Alicia, and Katie suddenly giggled. What? Said Wood, frowning at their light-hearted behavior. He's that tall, good-looking one, isn't he? Said Angelina. Strong and silent, said Katie, and they started to giggle again. He's only silent because he's too thick to string two words together, said Fred impatiently. I don't know why you're worried. Oliver, Hufflepuff is a pushover. Last time we played them, Harry caught the snitch in about 5 minutes, remember? That was Sorcerer's Stone, when he was terrified because Snape was a referee. He was terrified that Snape was going to somehow kill him. So he wanted to win the match as quickly as possible, so he won it in 5 minutes. We were playing in completely different conditions, Wood shouted, his eyes bulging slightly. Diggory's got a very strong side together. He's an excellent seeker. I was afraid you'd take it like this. You mustn't relax. We must keep our focus. Slytherin is trying to wrongfoot us. We must win. Oliver, calm down, said Fred, looking slightly alarmed. We're taking Hufflepuff very seriously. Seriously. The day before the match, the winds reached howling point, and the rain fell harder than ever. It was so dark inside the corridors and classrooms that extra torches and lanterns were lit. The Slytherin team was looking very smug indeed, and none more so than Malfoy. Ah, if only my arm was feeling a bit better, he sighed as the gale outside pounded the windows. Harry had no room in his head to worry about anything except the match tomorrow. Oliver Wood kept hurrying up to him between classes and giving him tips. The third time this happened, Wood talked for so long that Harry suddenly realized he was 10 minutes late for Defense Against the Dark Arts, and set off at a run, with Wood shouting after him. Diggory's got a very fast swerve, Harry, so you might want to try looping him. Harry skidded to a halt outside the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, pulled the door open, and dashed inside. Sorry I'm late, Professor Lupin. But it wasn't Professor Lupin who looked up at him from the teacher's desk. It was Snape. This lesson began 10 minutes ago, Potter, so I think we'll make it 10 points from Gryffindor. Sit down. But Harry didn't move. Where's Professor Lupin? He said. He says he is feeling too ill to teach today, said Snape with a twisted smile. I believe I told you to sit down. But Harry stayed where he was. What's wrong with him? Snape's black eyes glittered. Nothing life-threatening, he said, looking as though he wished it were. 5 more points from Gryffindor, and if I have to ask you to sit down again, it will be 50. Harry walked slowly to his seat and sat down. Snape looked around at the class. As I was saying before Potter interrupted, Professor Lupin has not left any record of the topics you have covered so far. Please, sir, we've done Boggarts, Redcaps, Kappas, and Grindylows, said Hermione quickly, and we're just about to start. Be quiet, said Snape coldly. I did not ask for information. I was merely commenting on Professor Lupin's lack of organization. He's the best Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher we've ever had, said Dean Thomas boldly, and there was a murmur of agreement from the rest of the class. Snape looked more menacing than ever. You are easily satisfied. Lupin is hardly overtaxing you. I would expect first years to be able to deal with redcaps and grindylows. Today we shall discuss... Harry watched him flick through the textbook to the very back chapter, which he must know they hadn't covered. Werewolves, said Snape. I wonder why we're learning about them. But, sir, said Hermione, seemingly unable to restrain herself, we're not supposed to do werewolves yet. We're due to start hinky-punks. Miss Granger, said Snape in a voice of deadly calm, I was under the impression that I am teaching this lesson, not you, and I am telling you all to turn to page 394. He glanced around again. All of you, now. With many bitter sidelong looks and some sullen muttering, the class opened their books. Which of you can tell me how we distinguish between the werewolf and the true wolf? Said Snape. Everyone sat in motionless silence, everyone except Hermione, whose hand, as it so often did, had shot straight into the air. Anyone? Snape said, ignoring Hermione. His twisted smile was back. Are you telling me that Professor Lupin hasn't even taught you the basic distinction between... We told you, said Parvati suddenly. We haven't got as far as werewolves yet. We're still on... Silence, snarled Snape. Well, well, well. I never thought I'd meet a third-year class who wouldn't even recognize a werewolf when they saw one. I shall make a point of informing Professor Dumbledore how very behind you all are. He's literally the worst human being. Oh my goodness. I wrote a lot on this page. I was very excited about something. Right. I wrote all along the edge of this page. Are you really going to feel better about yourself if you bully Lupin in front of his class? That's what I wrote. Please, sir, said Hermione, whose hand was still in the air, the werewolf differs from the true wolf in several small ways. The snout of the werewolf... That is the second time you have spoken out of turn, Miss Granger, said Snape coolly. 5 more points from Gryffindor for being an insufferable know-it-all. Hermione went very red, put down her hand, and stared at the floor with her eyes full of tears. Oh, what an absolute... Ah! He's the worst! He's the absolute worst. It was a mark of how much the class loathed Snape that they were all glaring at him, because every one of them had called Hermione a know-it-all at least once, and Ron, who told Hermione she was a know-it-all at least twice a week, said loudly, You asked us a question, and she knows the answer. Why ask if you don't want to be told? Yes! Yes! Ron to the rescue! Which is terrible in the movie, because in the movie he's like, he's got a point, you know. Oh, the movie did it terribly wrong, terrible injustice in this part, because Ron was actually awesome in this moment. The class knew instantly he'd gone too far. Snape advanced on Ron slowly, and the room held its breath. Detention, Weasley, Snape said silkily, his voice very close to Ron's, and if I ever hear you criticize the way I teach a class again, you will be very sorry indeed. Fine, do it. Come at me. That's what I'd be like. I'd be out of there. Oh my gosh, no, I wouldn't take this. I would not take this. I'm not afraid of Snape. No, I would stand for this. Oh, jeez. No one made a sound throughout the rest of the lesson. They sat and made notes on werewolves from the textbook while Snape prowled up and down the rows of desks, examining the work they had been doing with Professor Lupin. Very poorly explained. That is incorrect. The kappa is more commonly found in Mongolia. Professor Lupin gave this 8 out of 10. I wouldn't have given it 3. That's actually mentioned in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. He's actually wrong about kappas, and I wish I had the textbook with me. It's in my closet somewhere. In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Actually, you know what? I could probably look it up. It actually mentions this bit. And in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, in Ron's copy, well, Harry's copy, which Ron borrows, he actually mentions, like, see, Snape is wrong in that section. Okay. Kappas, Harry Potter. Da-da-da-da. Ooh. Japanese water demon. Harry Potter wiki. Yes. Yes. In 1993, Professor Remus Lupin introduced his third-year Defense Against the Dark Arts class of Kappas, which was the third creature they studied. When covering the class for Professor Lupin, Professor Professor Severus Snape incorrectly stated that a Kappa is a red-haired imp-like creature. That's not what he said. He stated that that they're primarily found in Mongolia. Where are they prominently found? Can you tell me? Because Fantastic Beasts Where to Find Them talks about it. Okay. Huh? Apparently Bill Weasley used to be a tutor. I didn't know that. Oh. Read the wiki, everybody. Okay. 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 That's not helpful. I want to know where they're actually here. I'm gonna Google help. Kappas, Harry Potter. More commonly found. It says Mongolia. No, that's wrong. I'm telling you, that's wrong. Mainly in Japan, but they live in shallow water mainly in Japan, though when substituting for Professor Lupin, Professor Snape asserted that they were more commonly found in Mongolia. So they're not more commonly found in Mongolia, they're more commonly found in Japan. Mongolia isn't in Japan, is it? Let me make sure. I don't want to look like an idiot. Mongolia. Where is Mongolia? Yeah, it's a country. Not in Japan, obviously. It's its own country. Bordered by China and Russia. Cool. Okay, so yeah, Kappas are most notably found in Japan, not Mongolia. And if you read it in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Ron will make a note of it there. He'll be like, see, Snape was wrong. When the bell rang at last, Snape held them back. You will each write an essay to be handed in to me on the ways you recognize and kill werewolves. I want 2 rolls of parchment on the subject, and I want them by Monday morning. It is time somebody took this class in hand. Weasley, stay behind. We need to arrange your detention. Harry and Hermione left the room with the rest of the class, who waited until they were well out of earshot, then burst into a furious tirade about Snape. Snape's never been like this with any other Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers. Even if he did want the job, Harry said to Hermione. Why's he got it in for Lupin? Do you think this is all because of the boggart? No, actually. It's because of a childhood grudge. I don't know, said Hermione pensively, but I really hope Professor Lupin gets better soon. Ron caught up with them 5 minutes later in a towering rage. Do you know what that... He called Snape something that made Hermione say, Ron! He's making me do. I've got to scrub out the bedpans in the hospital wing. Without magic! He was breathing deeply, his fists clenched. Why couldn't Black have hidden in Snape's office, eh? He could have finished them off for us. He would have too. Snape, Sirius would have loved to have gotten rid of Snape. Oh my goodness. What's funny is you'll find that whenever Ron is joking or when Ron is not being serious, he usually says something really truthful. In Chamber of Secrets, he he was talking about Tom Riddle and what service to the school he'd done, and Ron's like, "What did he do? Kill Moaning Myrtle? Because I would have done the whole school a favor." Which that's not why he got the reward, but that is exactly what he did. And so Ron, from time to time, will make jokes and not realize that he's actually hitting on an important point. Harry woke extremely early the next morning, so early that it was still dark. For a moment he thought the roaring of the wind had woken him. Then he felt a cold breeze on the back of his neck and sat bolt upright. Peeves the poltergeist had been floating next to him, blowing hard into his ear. "What did you do that for?" said Harry furiously. Peeves puffed out his cheeks, blew hard, and zoomed backward out of the room, cackling. Harry fumbled for his alarm clock and looked at it. It was 4:30. Cursing Peeves, he rolled over and tried to get back to sleep, but it was very difficult, now that he was awake, to ignore the sounds of the thunder rumbling overhead, the pounding of the wind against the castle walls, and the distant creaking of the trees in the forbidden forest. In a few hours he would be out on the Quidditch field, battling through that gale. Finally he gave up any thought of more sleep, got up, dressed, picked up his Nimbus 2000, and walked quietly out of the dormitory. As Harry opened the door, something brushed against his leg. He bent down just in time to grab Crookshanks by the end of his bushy tail and drag him outside. "You know, I reckon Ron was right about you," Harry told Crookshanks suspiciously. "There are plenty of mice around this place. Go and chase them. Go on," he added, nudging Crookshanks down the spiral staircase with his foot. "Leave Scabbers alone." The noise of the storm was even louder in the common room. Harry knew better than to think the match would be cancelled. Quidditch matches weren't called off for trifles like thunderstorms. Nevertheless, he was starting to feel very apprehensive. Wood had pointed out Cedric Diggory to him in the corridor. Diggory was a 5th year and a lot bigger than Harry. Seekers were usually light and speedy, but Diggory's weight would be an advantage in this weather because he was less likely to be blown off course. Harry whiled away the hours until dawn, in front of the fire, getting up every now and then to stop Crookshanks from sneaking up the boys' staircase again. At long last, Harry thought it must be time for breakfast, so he headed through the portrait hole alone. "Stand and fight, you mangy cur!" yelled Sir Cadogan. "Oh, shut up," Harry yawned. He revived a bit over a large bowl of porridge, and by the time he started on toast, the rest of the team had turned up. "It's going to be a tough one," said Wood, who wasn't eating anything. "Stop worrying, Oliver," said Alicia soothingly. "We don't mind a bit of rain." But it was considerably more than a bit of rain. Such was the popularity of Quidditch that the whole school turned out to watch the match as usual, but they ran down the lawns toward the Quidditch okay. It says field, I was thinking pitch, so I said fitch. But they ran down the lawns toward the Quidditch field, heads bowed against the furious wind, umbrellas being whipped out of their hands as they went. Just before he entered the locker room, Harry saw Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle laughing and pointing at him from under an enormous umbrella on their way to the stadium. The team changed into their scarlet robes and waited for Wood's usual pre-match pep talk, but it didn't come. He tried to speak several times, made an odd gulping noise, then shook his head hopelessly and beckoned them to follow him. The wind was so strong that they staggered sideways as they walked out onto the field. If the crowd was cheering, they couldn't hear it over the fresh rolls of thunder. Rain was splattering over Harry's glasses. How on earth was he going to see the snitch in this? The Hufflepuffs were approaching from the opposite side of the field, wearing canary yellow robes. The captains walked up to each other and shook hands. Diggory smiled at Wood, but Wood now looked as though he had lockjaw, and merely nodded. Harry saw Madame Hooch's mouth form the words, "Mount your brooms." He pulled his right foot out of the mud with a squelch and swung it over his Nimbus 2000. Madame Hooch put her whistle to her lips and gave it a blast that sounded shrill and distant. They were off. Harry rose fast, but his Nimbus was swerving slightly with the wind. He held it as steady as he could and turned, squinting into the rain. Within 5 minutes, Harry was soaked to his skin and frozen, hardly able to see his teammates, let alone the tiny snitch. He flew backward and forward across the field, past blurred red and yellow shapes, with no idea of what was happening in the rest of the game. He couldn't hear the commentary over the wind. The crowd was hidden beneath a sea of cloaks and battered umbrellas. Twice Harry came very close to being unseated by a bludger. His vision was so clouded by the rain on his glasses he hadn't seen them coming. He lost track of time, It was getting harder and harder to hold his broom straight. The sky was getting darker, as though night had decided to come early. Twice Harry nearly hit another player, without knowing whether it was a teammate or opponent. Everyone was now so wet, and the rain so thick he could hardly tell them apart. With the first flash of lightning came the sound of Madame Hooch's whistle. Harry could just see the outline of Wood through the thick rain, gesturing him to the ground. The whole team splashed down into the mud. "I called for a timeout," Wood roared on his team. "Come on, under here." They hurtled at the edge of the field under a large umbrella. Harry took off his glasses and wiped them hurriedly on his robes. "What's the score?" "They're 50 points up," said Wood, "but unless you get the snitch soon, they'll be playing into the night." "I've got no chance with these on," Harry said exasperatedly, waving his glasses. At that very moment Hermione appeared on at his shoulder. She was holding her cloak over her head and was, inexplicably, beaming. "I've had an idea, Harry. Give me your glasses, quick." He handed them to her, and as the team watched in amazement, Hermione tapped them with her wand and said, "Impervious." "There," she said, handing them back to Harry. "They'll repel water." Wood looked as though he could have kissed her. "Brilliant," he called hoarsely after her as she disappeared into the crowd. "Okay, team, let's go for it." Hermione's spell had done the trick. Harry was still numb with cold, still wetter than he'd ever been in his life. But he could see. Full of fresh determination, he urged his broom through the turbulent air, staring in every direction for the snitch, avoiding a bludger, ducking beneath Diggory, who was streaking in the opposite direction. There was another clap of thunder, followed immediately by forked lightning. This was getting more and more dangerous. Harry needed to get the snitch quickly. He turned, intending to head back toward the middle of the field, but at that moment another flash of lightning illuminated the stands, and Harry saw something that distracted him completely. The silhouette of an enormous shaggy black dog, clearly imprinted against the sky, motionless in the topmost empty row of seats. See, in the movie it was in the clouds, which is dumb. It's actually, Sirius, we know that the dog is Sirius Black, and he's actually there in the stands watching Harry play. Harry's numb hand slipped on the broom handle, and his nimbus dropped a few feet. Shaking his sodden bangs out of his eyes, he squinted back into the stands. The dog had vanished. "Harry!" came Wood's anguished yell from the Gryffindor goalpost. "Harry, behind you!" Harry looked wildly around. Cedric Diggory was pelting up the field, and a tiny speck of gold was shimmering in the rain-filled air between them. With a jolt of panic, Harry threw himself flat to the broom handle and zoomed toward the snitch. "Come on," he growled at his nimbus as the rain whipped his face. "Faster!" But something odd was happening. An eerie silence was falling across the stadium. The wind, though as strong as ever, was forgetting to roar. It was as though someone had turned off the sound, as though Harry had gone suddenly deaf. What was going on? And then a horribly familiar wave of cold swept over him, and inside him, just as he became aware of something moving on the field below. Before he'd had time to think, Harry had taken his eyes off the snitch and looked down. At least 100 Dementors, their hidden faces pointing up at him, were standing beneath him. It was as though freezing water were rising in his chest, cutting at his insides. And then he heard it again. Someone was screaming inside his head. A woman. "Not Harry! Not Harry! Please, not Harry!" "Stand aside, you silly girl. Stand aside, now." "Not Harry! Please, no! Take me! Kill me instead!" Numbing, swirly white mist was filling Harry's brain. What was he doing? Why was he flying? He needed to help her. She was going to die. She was going to be murdered. He was falling through the icy mist. "Not Harry! Please! Have mercy! Have mercy!" A shrill voice was laughing, the woman was screaming, and Harry knew no more. Lucky the ground was so soft. I thought he was dead for sure. But he didn't even break his glasses. Harry could hear the voices whispering, but they made no sense whatsoever. He didn't have a clue where he was or how he'd got there or what he'd been doing before he got there. All he knew was that every inch of him was aching as though he had been beaten. That was the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life. The scariest thing. Hooded black figures. Cold. Screaming. Harry's eyes snapped open. He was lying in the hospital wing. The Gryffindor Quidditch team, spattered with mud from head to foot, was gathered around his bed. Ron and Hermione were also there, looking as though they had just climbed out of a swimming pool. "Harry," said Fred, who looked extremely white underneath the mud, "how are you feeling?" It was as though Harry's memory was on fast forward, the lightning, the Grim, the Snitch, and the Dementors. "What happened?" he said, sitting up so suddenly they all gasped. "You fell off," said Fred. "Must have been, 50 feet?" "We thought you died," said Alicia, who was shaking. Hermione made a small, squeaky noise. Her eyes were extremely bloodshot. "But the match," said Harry. "What happened? Are we doing a replay?" No one said anything. The horrible truth sank into Harry like a stone. "We didn't lose." "Diggory got the snitch," said George, "just after you fell. He didn't realize what had happened. When he looked back and saw you on the ground, he tried to call it off, wanted a rematch, but they won fair and square. Even Wood admits it." Cedric. What a good guy. What a good guy. "Where is Wood?" said Harry, suddenly realizing he wasn't there. "Still in the showers," said Fred. "We think he's trying to drown himself." Harry put his face to his knees, his hands gripping his hair. Fred grabbed his shoulder and shook it roughly. "Come on, Harry, you've never missed a snitch before. There had to be one time you didn't get it," said George. "It's not over yet," said Fred. "We lost by 100 points, right? So if Hufflepuff loses to Ravenclaw and we beat Ravenclaw and Slytherin, Hufflepuff will have to lose by at least 200 points, said George. "But if they beat Ravenclaw..." "No way, Ravenclaw's too good. But if Slytherin loses against Hufflepuff, it all depends on the points. A margin of 100 either way." Harry lay there, not saying a word. They had lost. For the first time ever, he had lost a Quidditch match. After 10 minutes or so, Madame Pomfrey came over to tell the team to leave him in peace. "We'll come and see you later," Fred told him. "Don't beat yourself up, Harry. You're still the best seeker we've ever had." How nice. Actually, put a heart. The teams trooped out, trailing mud behind them. Madame Pomfrey shut the door behind them, looking disapproving. Ron and Hermione moved nearer to Harry's bed. "Dumbledore was very angry," Hermione said in a quaking voice. "I'd never seen him like that before. He ran onto the field as you fell, waved his wand, and you sort of slowed down before you hit the ground. Then he whirled his wand at the Dementors, shot silver stuff at them. They left the stadium right away. He was furious they'd come onto the grounds. We heard him. Then he magicked you onto a stretcher," said Ron, "and walked up to school with you floating on it. Everyone thought you were..." His voice faded, but Harry hardly noticed. He was thinking about what the Dementors had done to him, about the screaming voice. He looked up and saw Ron and Hermione looking at him so anxiously that he quickly cast around for something matter-of-fact to say. "Did someone get my nimbus?" Ron and Hermione looked quickly at each other. What?" said Harry, looking from one to the other. "Well, when you fell off, it got blown away," said Hermione hesitantly. "And?" "And it hit... Oh, Harry, it hit the Whomping Willow." Harry's insides lurched. The Whomping Willow was a very violent tree that stood alone in the middle of the grounds. "And?" he said, dreading the answer. "Well, you know the Whomping Willow," said Ron. It doesn't like being hit." Professor Flitwick brought it back just before you came around," said Hermione in a very small voice. Slowly she reached down for a bag at her feet and turned it upside down and tipped a dozen bits of splintered wood and twig onto the bed, the only remains of Harry's faithful, finally beaten broomstick. But that is the end of Chapter 9. Whew. And now it is time for our intermission. And after the intermission, we will read Chapter 10, The Marauder's Map. Okay. If you're just now joining us, welcome. And I ask that you would leave a like on the stream or the video, depending on when you're watching this. And please feel free to talk in the chat, join the conversation, or talk in the comment section down below. I will read your comments and respond to them. If you're not a subscriber, please click subscribe and click the bell notification icon so you can be notified the next time I go live and the next time I upload. No live streams next week, but I plan to come back the week after for Easter break. So, if you want to know my streaming schedule or just hear other things about my life, follow me on Twitter, link in the description. And now we will have our 15-minute intermission. Please enjoy the new intermission screen and music that I have created. I quite like it. Okay, so now we're going to read Chapter 10, The Marauder's Map. Now this chapter is long. I just looked at it. Whew, it is really long. So, let's get started. Chapter 10, The Marauder's Map. Madame Pomfrey insisted on keeping Harry in the hospital wing for the rest of the weekend. He didn't argue or complain, but he wouldn't let her throw away the shattered remnants of his Nimbus 2000. He knew he was being stupid, knew that the Nimbus was beyond repair, but Harry couldn't help it. He felt as though he'd lost one of his best friends. Oh. He had a stream of visitors, all intent on cheering him up. Hagrid sent him a bunch of earwiggy flowers that looked like yellow cabbages, and Ginny Weasley, blushing furiously, turned up with a get-well card that she had made herself, which sang shrilly unless Harry kept it shut under his bowl of fruit. She didn't learn the first time that she tried to give him a card, or it was a Valentine's Day gram from the last book. How wonderfully that went. The Gryffindor team visited again on Sunday morning, this time accompanied by Wood, who told Harry in a hollow, dead sort of voice that he didn't blame him in the slightest. Ron and Hermione left Harry's bedside only at night, but nothing anyone said or did could make Harry feel any better, because they knew only half of what was troubling him. He hadn't told anyone about the Grim, not even Ron and Hermione, because he knew Ron would panic and Hermione would scoff. The fact remained, however, that it had now appeared twice, and both appearances had been followed by near-fatal accidents. The first time, he had nearly been run over by the night bus. The second, fallen 50 feet from his broomstick. Was the Grim going to haunt him until he actually died? Was he going to spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder for the beast? And then there were the Dementors. Harry felt sick and humiliated every time he thought of them. Everyone said the Dementors were horrible, but no one else collapsed every time they went near one. No one else heard echoes in their head of their dying parents. Oh, Harry knows it's his parents now. Okay. Because Harry knew who that screaming voice belonged to now. He had heard her words, heard them over and over again during the night hours in the hospital wing while he lay awake, staring at the strips of moonlight on the ceiling. When the Dementors approached him, he heard the last moments of his mother's life, her attempts to protect him, Harry, from Lord Voldemort, and Voldemort's laughter before he murdered her. Harry dozed fitfully, sinking into dreams full of clammy, rotted hands and petrified pleading, jerking awake to dwell again on his mother's voice. It was a relief to return to the noise and bustle of the main school on Monday, when he was forced to think about other things, even if he had to endure Draco Malfoy's taunting. Malfoy was almost beside himself with glee at Gryffindor's defeat. He had finally taken off his bandages and celebrated having the full use of both arms again by doing spirited imitations of Harry falling off his broom. Malfoy spent much of their next potions class doing Dementor imitations across the dungeon. Ron finally cracked and flung a large, slippery crocodile heart at Malfoy, which hit him in the face and caused Snape to take 50 points from Gryffindor. Worth it! If Snape's teaching defense against the dark arts again, I'm skiving off, said Ron as they headed toward Lupin's classroom after lunch. Check who's in there, Hermione. Hermione appeared around the classroom door. It's okay. Professor Lupin was back at work. It certainly looked as though he had been ill. His old robes were hanging more loosely on him, and there were dark shadows beneath his eyes. Nevertheless, he had smiled at the class as they took their seats, and they burst at once into an explosion of complaints about Snape's behavior while Lupin had been ill. It's not fair. He was only filling in. Why should he give us homework? We don't know anything about werewolves. 2 rolls of parchment. Did you tell Professor Snape we haven't covered them yet? Oh, sorry. This is Lupin. Did you tell Professor Snape we haven't covered them yet? Lupin asked, frowning slightly. The babble broke out again. Yes, but he said we were really behind. He wouldn't listen. 2 rolls of parchment. Professor Lupin smiled at the look of indignation on every face. Don't worry, I'll speak to Professor Snape. You don't have to do the essay. And Hermione's like, but I already did it. Oh no, said Hermione, looking very disappointed. I've already finished it. They had a very enjoyable lesson. Professor Lupin had brought along a glass box containing a hinky-punk, a little one-legged creature who looked as though he were made of wisps of smoke, rather frail and harmless-looking. Lewis Travellers are the bugs, said Professor Lupin as they took notes. You notice the lantern dangling from its hand. Hops ahead. People follow the light. Then the hinky-punk made a horrible squelching noise against the glass. When the bell rang, everyone gathered up their things and headed for the door, Harry among them. But, wait a moment, Harry, Lupin called. I'd like a word. Harry doubled back and watched Professor Lupin covering the hinky-punk's box with a cloth. One thing that we learned about Prisoner of Azkaban in my special topics Harry Potter class in college is that you'll find oftentimes in Harry Potter, and most notably in Prisoner of Azkaban, the concept of false appearances. Somebody appears to be one way, but they're really another way. Lupin especially appears to be a normal, everyday human. But he's actually a werewolf. Sirius Black appears to be a bad guy, but he's actually a good guy. You'll see in little things too, just like in Defense Against the Dark Arts, hinky punks are a version of false appearances. They appear to be harmless. They're frail and harmless looking, but they're actually quite deadly. You'll see that all over the Harry Potter books in general, but more notably Prisoner of Azkaban. I heard about the match, said Lupin, turning back to his desk and starting to pile books into his briefcase. I'm sorry about your broomstick. Is there any chance of fixing it? No, said Harry. The tree smashed it to bits. Lupin sighed. They planted the Whomping Willow the same year I arrived at Hogwarts. People used to play a game trying to get near enough to touch the trunk. In the end, a boy called Davy Gudgeon? Yeah, Davy Gudgeon nearly lost an eye, and we were forbidden to go near it. No broomstick would have a chance. Yes, they planted the Whomping Willow the same year that Lupin arrived at Hogwarts. Wink, wink. He'll explain that they planted the Whomping Willow because of Lupin arriving in Hogwarts. Did you hear about the Dementors too? Said Harry with difficulty. Lupin looked at him quickly. Yes, I did. I don't think any of us have seen Professor Dumbledore that angry. They have been growing restless for some time, furious at his refusal to let them inside the grounds. I suppose they were the reason you fell? Yes, said Harry. He hesitated, and then the question he had to ask burst from him before he could stop himself. Why? Why do they affect me like that? Am I just... It has nothing to do with weakness, said Professor Lupin sharply, as though he had read Harry's mind. The Dementors affect you worse than the others because there are more horrors in your past than that the others don't have. A ray of wintry sunlight fell across the classroom, illuminating Lupin's gray hairs and the lines on his young face. Dementors are among the foulest creatures that walk this earth. They infest the darkness, the darkest, filthiest places. They glory in decay and despair. They drain peace, hope, and happiness out of the air around them. Even Muggles feel their presence, though they can't see them. And Muggles certainly do feel their presence. That's what depression is. Get you near a Dementor and every good feeling, every happy memory will be sucked out of you. If it can, the Dementor will feed on you long enough to reduce you to something like itself, soulless and evil. You'll be left with nothing but the worst experiences of your life. And the worst that happened to you, Harry, is enough to make anyone fall off their broom. You have nothing to feel ashamed of. That whole section is quotable from Lupin. When they get near me, Harry stared at Lupin's desk, his throat tight. I can hear Voldemort murdering my mum. Lupin made a sudden motion with his arm, as though to grip Harry's shoulder, but thought better of it. There was a moment of silence then. Come on, Lupin! You're practically his uncle. I mean, pretty much. I mean, everything but a name. I mean, he wanted to. Harry has no idea who Lupin is. Has no clue who Lupin is. Man. So close. He's family. Why did they have to come to the match? Said Harry bitterly. They're getting hungry, said Lupin coolly, shutting his briefcase with a snap. Dumbledore won't let them into the school, so the supply of human prey is dried up. I don't think they could resist the large crowd around the Quidditch field. All that excitement, emotions running high. It was their idea of a feast. Azkaban must be terrible, Harry muttered. Lupin nodded grimly. The fortress is set on a tiny island, way out to sea, but they don't need walls and water to keep the prisoners in. Not when they're all trapped inside their own heads, incapable of a single cheerful thought. Most of them go mad within weeks. You might even consider it cruel and unusual punishment. But Sirius Black escaped from them, Harry said slowly. He got away. Because he's innocent. That's why. Dementors don't affect the innocent the way they do the guilty. Lupin's briefcase slipped from the desk. He had to stoop quickly to catch it. I wonder what that means. I wonder why she put that there. It seems significant. Yes, he said, straightening up. Black must have found a way to fight them. I wouldn't have believed it possible. Dementors are supposed to drain a wizard of his powers if he is left with them too long. You made the Dementor on the train back off, said Harry suddenly. There are certain defenses one can use, said Lupin. But there was only one Dementor on the train. The more there are, the more difficult it becomes to resist. What defenses? Said Harry at once. Can you teach me? I don't pretend to be an expert at fighting Dementors, Harry. Quite the contrary. But if the Dementors come to another Quidditch match, I need to be able to fight them. Lupin looked into Harry's determined face, hesitated, then said, Well, all right. I'll try and help. But it'll have to wait until next term, I'm afraid. I have a lot to do before the holidays. I chose a very inconvenient time to fall ill. What with the promise of anti-Dementor lessons from Lupin, the thought that he might never have to hear his mother's death again, and the fact that Ravenclaw flattened Hufflepuff in their Quidditch match at the end of November, Harry's mood took a definite upturn. Gryffindor was not out of the running after all, although they could not afford to lose another match. Wood became repossessed of his manic energy and worked his team as hard as ever in the chilly haze of rain that persisted into December. Harry saw no hint of a Dementor within the grounds. Dumbledore's anger seemed to be keeping them at their stations at the entrances. 2 weeks before the end of the term, the sky lightened suddenly to a dazzling opaline white, and the muddy grounds were revealed one morning covering in glittering frost. Inside the castle there was a buzz of Christmas in the air. Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, had already decorated his classroom with shimmering lights that turned out to be real, fluttering fairies. The students were all happily discussing their plans for the holidays. Both Ron and Hermione had decided to remain at Hogwarts, and though Ron said it was because he couldn't stand 2 weeks with Percy, and Hermione insisted she needed to use the library, Harry wasn't fooled. They were doing it to keep him company, and he was very grateful. Friendship. That's very nice of them. I probably wouldn't have done that. I would have gone home, I gotta see my family, Harry, Harry can come with me. Harry can come to my house. That'd be awesome. I would do that. That's what I would do. To everyone's delight except Harry's, there was to be another Hogsmeade trip on the very last weekend of the term. We could do all our Christmas shopping there, said Hermione. Mum and Dad would really love those tooth-flossing string mints from Honeydukes. Resigned to the fact that he would be the only third year staying behind again, Harry borrowed a copy of Witch Broomstick from Wood and decided to spend the day reading up on the different makes. He had been riding one of the school brooms at team practice, an ancient shooting star, which was very slow and jerky, and he definitely needed a new broom of his own. On the Saturday morning of the Hogsmeade trip, Harry bid goodbye to Ron and Hermione, who were wrapped in cloaks and scarves, then turned up the marble staircase alone and headed back toward Gryffindor Tower. Snow had started to fall outside the windows, and the castle was very still and quiet. Psst, Harry. He turned, halfway along the third-floor corridor, to see Fred and George peering out at him from behind a statue of a humpbacked, one-eyed witch. Why are they just now thinking of this? "What are you doing?" said Harry curiously. "How come you're not going to Hogsmeade?" "We've come to give you a bit of festive cheer before we go," said Fred with a mysterious wink. "Come in here." He nodded toward an empty classroom to the left of the one-eyed statue. Harry followed Fred and George inside. George closed the door quietly, and they turned, beaming, to look at Harry. "Early Christmas present for you, Harry," he said. Fred pulled something from inside his cloak with a flourish and laid it on one of the desks. It was a large, square, very worn piece of parchment with nothing written on it. Harry suspecting one of Fred and George's jokes, stared at it. "What's that supposed to be?" "This, Harry, is the secret to our success," said George, patting the parchment fondly. "It's a wretch giving it to you," said Fred, "but we decided last night your need's greater than ours." "Anyway, we know it by heart," said George. "We bequeath it to you. We don't really need it any more." "And what do I need what do I need with a bit of old parchment?" said Harry. "A bit of old parchment," said Fred, closing his eyes with a grimace as though Harry had mortally offended him. "Explain, George." "Well, when we were in our first year, Harry, young, carefree, and innocent," Harry snorted. He doubted whether Fred and George had ever been innocent. "Well, more innocent than we are now. We got into a spot of bother with Filch. We let off a dung bomb in the corridor, and it upset him for some reason. So he hauled us off to his office and started threatening us with the usual detention, disembowelment, and we couldn't help noticing a drawer in one of his filing cabinets marked confiscated and highly dangerous. "Don't tell me," said Harry, starting to grin. "Well, what would you have done?" said Fred. "George caused a diversion by dropping another dung bomb. I whipped the drawer open and grabbed this." "It's not as bad as it sounds, you know," said George. "We don't reckon Filch ever found out how to work it. He probably suspected what it was, though, or he wouldn't have confiscated it." "And you know how to work it?" "Oh, yes," said Fred, smirking. "This little beauty's taught us more than all the teachers in this school." "You're winding me up," said Harry, looking at the ragged old bit of parchment. "Oh, are we?" said George. He took out his wand, touched the parchment lightly, and said, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." And at once thin ink lines began to spread like a spider's web from the point that George's wand had touched. They joined each other, they crisscrossed, they fanned into every corner of the parchment, then words began to blossom across the top, great curly green words that proclaimed Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauder's map. It was a map showing every detail of the Hogwarts castle and grounds. But the truly remarkable thing were the tiny ink dots moving around it, each labeled with a name in minuscule writing. Astounded, Harry bent over it. A labeled dot in the top left corner showed that Professor Dumbledore was pacing his study. The caretaker's cat, Mrs. Norris, was prowling the second floor, and Peeves the poltergeist was currently bouncing around the trophy room. And as Harry's eyes traveled up and down the familiar corridors, he noticed something else. This map showed a set of passages he had never entered, and many of them seemed to lead right into Hogsmeade, said Fred, tracing one of them with his finger. "There are 7 in all. Now, Filch knows about these 4, he pointed them out, but we're sure we're the only ones who know about these. Don't bother with the one behind the mirror on the 4th floor. We used it until last winter, but it's caved in. Completely blocked. And we don't reckon anyone else uses that one because the Whomping Willow's placed right over the entrance. But this one leads right into the cellar of Honeydukes. We've used it loads of times. And as you might have noticed, the entrance is right outside this room, through that one-eyed old crone's hump." Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prong, sighed George, patting the heading of the map. We owe them so much. I actually have a copy of the Marauders map. It's actually what you see in the thumbnail for the live streams. Noble men, working tirelessly to help a new generation of lawbreakers, said Fred solemnly. Right, said George briskly. Don't forget to wipe it after you've used it, or anyone can read it, Fred said warningly. Just tap it again and say mischief managed, and it'll go blank. So, young Harry, said Fred in an uncanny impersonation of Percy, mind you behave yourself. See you in Honeydukes, said George, winking. They left the room, both smirking in a satisfied sort of way. Harry stood there, gazing at the miraculous map. He watched the tiny ink Mrs. Norris turn left and pause to sniff at something on the floor. If Filch really didn't know, he wouldn't have to pass the Dementors at all. But even as he stood there, flooded with excitement, something Harry had once heard Mr. Weasley say came floating out of his memory. Never trust anything that can think for itself, if you can't see where it keeps its brain. That's from the last one, the diary that he was talking about. This map is one of those dangerous magical objects Mr. Weasley had been warning against. Aids for magical mischief makers. But then, Harry reasoned, he only wanted to use it to get into Hogsmeade. It wasn't as though he wanted to steal anything or attack anyone. And Fred and George had been using it for years without anything horrible happening. Harry traced the secret passage to Honeydukes with his finger. Then, quite suddenly, as though following orders, he rolled up the map, stuffed it inside his robes, and hurried to the door of the classroom. He opened it a couple notches. There was no one outside. Very carefully, he edged out of the room and behind the statue of the one-eyed witch. What did he have to do? He pulled out the map again and saw, to his astonishment, that a new ink finger had appeared upon it, labeled Harry Potter. This figure was standing exactly where the real Harry was standing, about halfway down the third-floor corridor. Harry watched carefully. His little ink self appeared to be tapping the witch with his minute wand. Harry quickly took out his real wand and tapped the statue. Nothing happened. He looked back at the map. The tiniest speech bubble had appeared next to his figure. The word inside said, Descendium, which is a spell that he uses a lot in the video games. Descendium, Harry whispered, tapping the stone witch again. At once the statue's hump opened wide enough to admit a fairly thin person. Harry glanced quickly up and down the corridor, then tucked the map away again, hoisted himself into the hole headfirst, and pushed himself forward. He slid a considerable way down what felt like a stone slide, then landed on cold, damp earth. He stood up, looking around. It was pitch dark. He held out his wand, muttered, Lumos, and saw that he was in a very narrow, low, earthy passageway. He raised the map, tapped it with the tip of his wand, and muttered, Mischief managed. The map went blank at once. He folded it carefully, tucked it inside his robes, then, heart beating fast, both excited and apprehensive, he set off. The passage twisted and turned, more like the burrow of a giant rabbit than anything else. Harry hurried along it, stumbling now and then on the uneven floor, holding his wand out in front of him. It took ages, but Harry had the thought of Honeydukes to sustain him. After what felt like an hour, the passage began to rise. Panting, Harry sped up, his face hot, his feet very cold. 2 minutes later, he came to the foot of some worn stone steps, which rose out of sight above him. Careful not to make any noise, Harry began to climb. 100 steps, 200 steps, he lost count as he climbed, watching his feet. Then, without warning, his head hit something hard. Says I solemnly swear I'm up to no good. It's my nice Harry Potter tumbler I got for my birthday last year. It seemed to be a trap door. Harry stood there, massaging the top of his head, listening. He couldn't hear any sounds above him. Very slowly he pushed the trapdoor open and peered over the edge. He was in a cellar, which was full of wooden crates and boxes. Harry climbed out of the trapdoor and replaced it. It blended so perfectly with the dusty floor that it was impossible to tell it was there. Harry crept slowly toward the wooden staircase that led upstairs. Now he could definitely hear voices, not to mention the tinkle of a bell and the opening and shutting of a door. Wondering what he ought to do, he suddenly heard a door open much closer at hand. Somebody was about to come downstairs. "And get another box of jelly slugs, dear. They nearly cleaned us out," said a woman's voice. A pair of feet was coming down the staircase. Harry leapt behind an enormous crate and waited for the footsteps to pass. He heard the man shifting boxes against the opposite wall. He might not get another chance. Quickly and silently, Harry dodged out from his hiding place and climbed the stairs. Looking back, he saw an enormous backside and shiny bald head buried in a box. Harry reached the door at the top of the stairs, slipped through it, and found himself behind the counter of Honeydukes. He ducked, crept sideways, and then straightened up. Honeydukes was so crowded with Hogwarts students that no one looked twice at Harry. He edged among them, looking around, and suppressed a laugh as he imagined the look that would spread over Dudley's piggy face if he could see where Harry was now. There were shelves upon shelves of the most succulent-looking sweets imaginable. Creamy chunks of nougat, shimmering pink squares of coconut ice, fat honey-colored toffees, hundreds of different kinds of chocolate in neat rows. There was a large barrel of every flavored beans and another of fizzing whiz-bees, the levitating sherbet balls that Ron had mentioned. Along yet another wall were special effects sweets, Drooble's best blowing gum, which filled a room with bluebell-colored bubbles that refused to pop for days, the strange, splintery tooth-flossing string mints, tiny black pepper imps, breathe fire for your friends. Ice mice, hear teeth chatter and squeak. Peppermint creams shaped like toads hop realistically in the stomach. Fragile sugar-spun quills and exploding bonbons. I've been to Honeydukes, actually, a few times. It's probably more... They didn't have quite that many sweets, but they do have a lot of sweets. It is delightful. Harry squeezed himself through a crowd of 6th years and saw a sign hanging in the farthest corner of the shop. Unusual tastes. Oh, they've got some unusual tastes, too, in Honeydukes. At Universal Studios. Ron and Hermione were standing underneath it, examining a tray of blood-flavored lollipops. Harry sneaked up behind them. No, Harry won't want one of those. They're for vampires, I expect, Hermione was saying. How about these? Said Ron, shoving a jar of cockroach clusters under Hermione's nose. Definitely not, said Harry. Ron nearly dropped the jar. Harry, squealed Hermione, what are you doing here? How did you... How indeed. Wow, said Ron, looking very impressed. You've learned to apparate. Of course I haven't, said Harry. He dropped his voice so that none of the 6th years could hear him and told them all about the Marauder's map. He should have brought his invisibility cloak. How come Fred and George never gave it to me? Said Ron, outraged. I'm their brother. But Harry isn't going to keep it, said Hermione, as though the idea was ludicrous. He's going to hand it in to Professor McGonagall, aren't you, Harry? No, absolutely not. Leave it to Hermione to rain on your parade. Absolutely not. No, I'm not, said Harry. Are you mad? Said Ron, goggling at Hermione. Hand in something that good? If I hand it in, I'll have to say where I got it. Filch would know Fred and George had nicked it. But what about Sirius Black? Hermione hissed. He could be using one of the passages on that map to get into the castle. The teachers have got to know. He can't be getting in through a passage, said Harry quickly. There are 7 secret tunnels on the map, right? Fred and George reckon Filch already knows about 4 of them. And the other 3, one of them's caved in, so no one can get through it. One of them's got the Whomping Willow planted over the entrance, so you can't get out of it. And the one I just came through, well, it's really hard to see the entrance to it down in the cellar, so unless he knew it was there... He does know it's there. He's one of the authors of the map. He made the map! Harry hesitated. What if Black did know the passage was there? Ron, however, cleared his throat significantly and pointed to a notice pasted on the inside of the sweet shop door. By order of the Ministry of Magic. Customers are reminded that until further notice, Dementors will be patrolling the streets of Hogsmeade every night after sundown. This measure has been put into place for the safety of Hogsmeade residents and will be lifted upon the recapture of Sirius Black. It is therefore advisable that you complete your shopping well before nightfall. Merry Christmas. See, said Ron quietly, I'd like to see Black try and break into Honeydukes with Dementors swarming all over the village. Like I said earlier, he already got past the Dementors once. And twice now. You think he can't do it again? Anyway, Hermione, the Honeydukes owners would hear a break-in, wouldn't they? They live over the shop. Yes, but... Hermione seemed to be struggling to find another problem. Look, Harry still shouldn't be coming into Hogsmeade. He hasn't got a signed form. If anyone finds out, we'll be in so much trouble. And it's not nightfall yet. What if Sirius Black turns up today? Now? He'd have a job spotting Harry in this, said Ron, nodding through the mullioned windows at the thick, swirling snow. Come on, Hermione, it's Christmas. Harry deserves a break. Hermione bit her lip, looking extremely worried. Are you going to report me? Harry asked her, grinning. Don't make that look at me. Oh, of course not. But honestly, Harry... Seen the fizzing Whizbees, Harry? Said Ron, grabbing him and leading him over to their barrel. And the jelly slugs, and the acid pops. Fred gave me one of those when I was 7. It burnt a hole right through my tongue. I remember Mum walloping him with a broomstick. Ron stared broodingly into the acid pops box. Reckon Fred'll take a bit of cockroach cluster if I told him they were peanuts? Probably not. When Ron and Hermione had paid for all of their sweets, the three of them left Honeydukes for the blizzard outside. Hogsmeade looked like a Christmas card. The little thatched cottages and shops were all covered in a layer of crisp snow. There were holly wreaths on the doors and strings of enchanted candles hanging in the trees. Harry shivered. Unlike the other two, he didn't have his cloak. They headed up the street, heads bowed against the wind, Ron and Hermione shouting through their scarves. That's the post office. Zonko's is up there. We could go up to the Shrieking Shack. Tell you what, said Ron, his teeth chattering. Shall we go for a butterbeer and the 3 broomsticks? Harry was more than willing. The wind was fierce and his hands were freezing, so they crossed the road and in a few minutes were entering the tiny inn. It was extremely crowded, noisy, warm, and smoky. A curvy sort of woman with a pretty face was serving a bunch of rowdy warlocks up at the bar. That's Madame Rosmata, said Ron. I'll get the drink, shall I? He added, going slightly red. Harry and Hermione made their way to the back of the room, where there was a small vacant table between the window and a handsome Christmas tree, which stood next to the fireplace. Ron came back 5 minutes later, carrying 3 foaming tankards of hot butterbeer. Merry Christmas, he said happily, raising his tankard. Harry drank deeply. It was the most delicious thing he'd ever tasted, and seemed to heat every bit of him from the inside. A sudden breeze ruffled his hair. The door of the 3 broomsticks had opened again. Harry looked over the rim of his tankard and choked. Professor McGonagall and Flitwick had just entered the pub with a flurry of snowflakes, shortly followed by Hagrid, who was deep in conversation with a portly man in a lime-green bowler hat and a pinstriped cloak, Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic. In an instant, Ron and Hermione had both placed hands on the top of Harry's head and forced him off his stool and under the table. It's almost like in a cartoon fashion. They just kind of push him down under the table. Dripping with butterbeer and crouching out of sight, Harry clutched his empty tankard and watched the teacher's and Fudge's feet move toward the bar, pause, then turn and walk right toward him. Somewhere above him, Hermione whispered, Mobiliarbus. The Christmas tree beside their table rose a few inches off the ground, drifted sideways, and landed with a soft thud right in front of their table, hiding them from view. Staring through the dense lower branches, Harry saw 4 sets of chair legs moved back from the table right beside theirs, then heard the grunts and sighs of the teachers and minister as they sat down. Next he saw another pair of feet, wearing sparkly turquoise high heels. I would love those. I have sparkly pink and sparkly silver high heels. I would love some sparkly turquoise high heels. And heard a woman's voice. A small gilly water. Mine, said Professor McGonagall's voice. 4 pints of mulled mead. Ta, Rosmerta. Oh, that's not Hagrid's voice. Ta, Rosmerta, said Hagrid. A cherry syrup and soda with ice and umbrella. Oh, that sounds so good. That sounds really good. Said Professor Flitwick, smacking his lips. So you'll be the red currant rum minister. Thank you, Rosmerta, my dear, said Fudge's voice. Lovely to see you again, I must say. Have one yourself, won't you? Come and join us. Well, thank you very much, Minister. Harry watched the glittering heels march away and back again. His heart was pounding uncomfortably in his throat. Why hadn't it occurred to him that this was the last weekend of term for the teachers, too? And how long were they going to sit there? He needed time to sneak back into Honeydukes if he wanted to return to school tonight. Hermione's leg gave a nervous twitch next to him. So what brings you to this neck of the woods, Minister? Came Madame Romerta's voice. Harry saw the lower part of Fudge's thick body twist in his chair as though he were checking for eavesdroppers. Then he said in a quiet voice, What else, my dear, but Sirius Black? I dare say you heard what happened up at the school at Halloween? I did hear a rumour, admitted Madame Rosemerta. Did you tell the whole pub, Hagrid? Said Professor McGonagall exasperatedly. Do you think Black's still in the area, Minister? Whispered Madame Rosemerta. I'm sure of it, said Fudge shortly. You know the Dementors have searched the whole village twice, said Madame Rosemerta, a slight edge in her voice. Scared all my customers away. It's very bad for business, Minister. Rosemerta, my dear, I don't like them any more than you do, said Fudge uncomfortably. Necessary precaution. Unfortunate, but there you are. I've just met some of them. They're in a fury against Dumbledore. He won't let them inside the castle grounds. They can talk? I wonder what they sound like. I should think not, said Professor McGonagall sharply. How are we supposed to teach with those horrors floating around? Hear, hear, squeaked tiny Professor Flitwick, whose feet were dangling a foot from the ground. All the same, demurred Fudge. Demurred. Wonder what that word means. Demurred. Let's look it up. Vocabulary time. Demurred meaning. Raise doubts or objections or show reluctance. I'll put doubt. They're here to protect you all from something much worse. We all know what Black's capable of. Do you know, I still have trouble believing it, said Madame Rosemerta thoughtfully. Of all the people to go over to the dark side, Sirius Black was the last I'd have thought. I mean, I remember him when he was a boy at Hogwarts. If you'd told me then what he was going to become, I'd have said you'd had too much mead. You don't know the half of it, Rosemerta, said Fudge gruffly. The worst he did isn't widely known. The worst? Said Madame Rosemerta, her voice alive with curiosity. Worse than murdering all those poor people, you mean? I certainly do, said Fudge. I can't believe that. What could possibly be worse? You say you remember him at Hogwarts, Rosemerta, muttered Professor McGonagall. Do you remember who his best friend was? Do you remember who his best friend was? Naturally, said Madame Rosemerta, with a small laugh. Never saw one without the other, did you? The number of times I had them in here. Ooh, they used to make me laugh. Quite the double act, Sirius Black and James Potter. Dun, dun, dun! Harry didn't know! Harry dropped his tankard with a loud clunk. Ron kicked him. Ouch! Precisely, said Professor McGonagall. Black and Potter. Ringleaders of their little gang. Both very bright, of course. Exceptionally bright, in fact. But I don't think we've ever had such a pair of troublemakers. I don't know, chuckled Hagrid. Fred and George Weasley might give them a run for their money. You'd have thought Black and Potter were brothers, chided Professor Flitwick. Inseparable. Of course they were, said Fudge. Potter trusted Black beyond all his other friends. Nothing changed when they left school. Black was his best man when James married Lily. They named him godfather to Harry. Harry has no idea, of course. You can imagine how the idea would torment him. Ah. Because Black turned out to be in league with you-know-who, whispered Madame Rosmerta. Worse even than that, my dear. Fudge dropped his voice and proceeded in a sort of low rumble. Not many people are aware that the Potters knew you-know-who was after them. Dumbledore, who was of course working tirelessly against you-know-who, had a number of useful spies. One of them tipped him off, and he alerted James and Lily at once. He advised them to go into hiding. Well, of course you-know-who wasn't an easy person to hide from. Dumbledore told them that their best chance was the Fidelius charm. Guess who the spy was that tipped them off? Who tipped Dumbledore off? It was Snape. Don't tell anybody. How does that work? Said Madame Rosmerta, breathless with interest. Professor Flitwick cleared his throat. An immensely complex spell, he said squeakily, involving the magical concealment of a secret inside a single living soul. That information is hidden inside the chosen person, or secret keeper, and is henceforth impossible to find. Unless, of course, the secret keeper chooses to divulge it. As long as the secret keeper refused to speak, you-know-who could search the village where Lily and James were staying for years and never find them, not even if he had his nose pressed against the sitting room window. So Black was the Potter's secret keeper? Whispered Madame Rosmerta. Naturally, said Professor McGonagall. James Potter told Dumbledore that Black would die rather than tell where they were, but Black was planning to go into hiding himself. And yet, Dumbledore remained worried. I remember him offering to be the Potter's secret keeper himself. He suspected Black? Gasped Madame Rosmerta. He was sure that somebody close to the Potters had been keeping you-know-who informed of their movements, said Professor McGonagall darkly. Indeed, he had suspected for some time that someone on our side had turned traitor and was passing a lot of information to you-know-who. But James Potter insisted on using Black. He did, said Fudge heavily, and then, barely a week after the Fidelius charm had been performed, Black betrayed them? Breathed Madame Rosmerta. He did indeed. Black was tired of his double agent role. He was ready to declare his support openly for you-know-who, and he seems to have planned this for the moment of the Potter's death. But, as we all know, you-know-who met his downfall in little Harry Potter. Powers gone, horribly weakened, he fled, and this left Black in a very nasty position indeed. His master had fallen at the very moment when he, Black, had shown his true colours as a traitor. He had no choice but to run for it. "Filthy, stinking turncoat," Hagrid said, so loudly that half the bar went quiet. "Shh," said Professor McGonagall. "I met him," growled Hagrid. "I must have been the last to see him before he killed all them people. It was me what rescued Harry from Lily and James's house after they were killed. Just got him out of the ruins, poor little thing, with the great slash across his forehead, his parents dead. And Sirius Black turns up, on that flying motorbike he used to ride. Never occurred to me what he'd been doing there. I didn't know he'd been Lily and James's secret keeper. Thought he'd just heard the news, you-know-who's attack, and come to see what he could do. White and shaking he was. And you know what I did? I comforted that murdering traitor," Hagrid roared. Yeah, that was Hagrid's motorbike. That was actually Sirius Black's motorbike. "Hagrid, please," said Professor McGonagall, "keep your voice down." "How was I to know he wasn't upset about Lily and James? It was you-know-who he cared about. And then he says, 'Give Harry to me, Hagrid. I'm his godfather. I'll look after him.' Ha! But I had me orders from Dumbledore, and I told Black no. Dumbledore said Harry was to go to his aunt and uncle's. Black argued, but in the end he gave in. Told me to take his motorbike to get Harry there. 'I won't need it any more,' he says. I should have known there was something fishy going on then. He loved that motorbike. What was he giving it to me for? Why wouldn't he need it any more? Fact was, it was too easy to trace. Dumbledore knew he'd been the Potter's secret keeper. Black knew he was going to have to run for it that night. Knew it was a matter of hours before the Ministry was after him. But what if I'd given Harry to him, eh? I bet he'd pitched him off the bike halfway or out to sea. His best friend's son. But when a wizard goes over to the dark side, there's nothing and no one that matters to him anymore. Not true. I wrote something in the side here. I said, not true, Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy. They're over to the dark side, but I'm still convinced that they love their son. At least Narcissa does. And definitely, because, in the end, her primary concern was making sure that her son was alive during the Battle of Hogwarts. A long silence followed Hagrid's story. Then Madame Rosmerta said with some satisfaction, "But he didn't manage to disappear, did he? The Ministry of Magic caught up with him next day." "Alas, if only we had," said Fudge bitterly. "It was not we who found him. It was little Peter Pettigrew, another of the Potter's friends. Maddened by grief, no doubt, and knowing that Black had been the Potter's secret keeper, he went after Black himself." "Pettigrew? That fat little boy who was always tagging around after them at Hogwarts," said Madame Rosmerta. "Hero worshipped Black and Potter," said Professor McGonagall. "Never quite in their league, talent-wise. I was often rather sharp with him. You can imagine how I regret that now." She sounded as though she had a sudden head cold. "There now, Minerva," said Fudge kindly. "Pettigrew died a hero's death. Eyewitnesses, Muggles, of course, we wiped the memories later, told us how Pettigrew cornered Black. They say he was sobbing, Lily and James, serious. How could you? And then he went for his wand. Well, of course, Black was quicker. Blew Pettigrew to smithereens." If only he had. Professor McGonagall blew her nose and said thickly, "Stupid boy. Foolish boy. You're always helpless at dueling. Should have left it to the Ministry. I tell you, if I'd got to Black before little Pettigrew did, I would have messed around with wands. I'd have ripped him limb from limb," Hagrid growled. "You don't know what you're talking about, Hagrid," said Fudge sharply. "Nobody but trained hit wizards from the magical law enforcement squad would have stood a chance against Black once he was cornered. I was junior minister in the Department of Magical Catastrophes at the time, and I was one of the first on the scene after Black murdered all those people. I will never forget it. I still dream about it sometimes. A crater in the middle of the street, so deep it had cracked the sewer below. Bodies everywhere, Muggles screaming, and Black standing there laughing. With what was left of Pettigrew in front of him, a heap of blood-stained robes and a few fragments." So Fudge was on the magical law enforcement squad. Oh, no. He was junior minister of the Department of Magical Catastrophes. Interesting fact. Fudge's voice stopped abruptly. There was the sound of 5 noses being blown. "Well, there you have it, Rosmerta," said Fudge thickly. "Black was taken away by 20 members of the magical law enforcement squad, and Pettigrew received the Order of Merlin First Class, which I think was some comfort to his poor mother. Black's been in Azkaban ever since." Madame Rosmerta let out a long sigh. "Is it true he's mad, Minister?" "I wish I could say that he was," said Fudge slowly. "I certainly believe his master's defeat unhinged him for a while. The murder of Pettigrew and all those Muggles was the action of a cornered and desperate man. Cruel. Pointless. Yet I met Black on my last inspection of Azkaban. Most of the prisoners in there sit muttering to themselves in the dark. There's no sense in them. But I was shocked at how normal Black seemed. He spoke quite rationally to me. It was unnerving. You'd have thought he was merely bored. Asked if I'd finished with my newspaper. Cool as you please. Said he missed doing the crossword. Yes, I was astounded to how little effect the Dementors seemed to be having on him. And he was one of the most heavily guarded in the place, Dementors outside his door day and night. Because he's innocent. It's because he's innocent that he can handle them. I think they explain that. Innocence gives you hope. In fact, in this newspaper that he gets from Fudge is where he sees the pictures of the Weasleys, and he sees Ron's rat and recognizes it as Pettigrew and realizes he's still alive. And where he is. He might already know that Pettigrew's alive, but now he knows where he is. But what do you think he's broken out to do? Said Madame Rosmerta. Good gracious, Minister, he isn't trying to rejoin you-know-who, is he? I dare say that he is. That is his, eventual plan, said Fudge, evasively. But we hope to catch Black long before that. I must say, you-know-who alone and friendless is one thing. But give him back his most devoted servant, and I shudder to think how quickly he'll rise again. There was a small chink of glass on wood. Someone had set down their glass. You know, Cornelius, if you're dining with the headmaster, we'd better head back up to the castle, said Professor McGonagall. One by one, the pairs of feet in front of Harry took the weight of their owners once more. Hems of cloaks swung into sight, and Madame Rosmerta's glittering heels disappeared behind the bar. The door of the three broomsticks opened again. There was another flurry of snow, and the teachers had disappeared. Harry? Ron's and Hermione's faces appeared under the table. They were both staring at him, lost for words. Whew, that was a long one. I hope you hung in there. That was a long one. That might have been the longest one. And it's heavy, too. A lot of information in that one. But that is the end of Chapter 10. That was a really long stream for me. For a Saturday. It's dark outside, and it was like daylight when we started. 2 hours and 11 minutes. Whew, that was long. I won't be streaming next week. It'll be Easter, so I'll be taking a break from streaming next week. But the week after, hopefully, I'm not sure when, but I'm planning on streaming the next week, and we'll be reading Chapter 11, The Firebolt, and Chapter 12, which I think is the Patronus? The Patronus, that's right. And we are halfway through the book. Look at that. I feel like we just started. This is exciting. We're over halfway. We're going to get right through this. We're going to finish, and then we're going to start Goblet of Fire. I'm so excited. Goblet of Fire is so good. It's not my favorite, but it's like right up there. Love Goblet of Fire. Very excited. But we have to finish Prisoner of Azkaban first. But thank you so much for joining. That'll be it for the stream. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Please feel free to chat in the comments section. When this live stream is over, I will read your comments and respond. Please leave a like on the video or the stream whenever you're watching this. It really helps. Tells YouTube that you like it. It's more likely to share it with other people. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I gained three new subscribers like overnight, and I was so excited. And I want more. I'm greedy. I want more. Please, if you enjoy this content, please subscribe for more. And click the bell notification icon so you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. And if you want to know my streaming schedule, which is different every week, follow me on Twitter. Link in the description. And I believe that is it. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a magical evening. Bye-bye.